This is without a doubt going to be one of the most exciting off seasons we've had in the NBA since quite possibly the 2019 NBA offseason. The offseason where we saw Kawhi Leonard leave the champion Toronto Raptors within a few weeks of winning them a championship. The offseason where we saw Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant team up in Brooklyn together. And the offseason where we saw the Lakers finally execute a trade for Anthony Davis. And in every NBA offseason, players switch teams, whether it be through free agency or trade. Usually every year we have a rough idea of what's going to happen during the NBA offseason. However, this offseason, unlike prior offseasons, has been absolutely unpredictable in every single way. A few weeks ago, we made a video on players that are about to be traded in the offseason, but in this list, we're going to include players that could be traded in addition to players that could leave their teams in free agency. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you can stay up to date on the latest and greatest NBA news. And now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? There's some players on this list that I mentioned in my players that are about to be traded video, and in those instances I'm gonna just briefly touch up on their situation, starting with Deandre Ayton. Now, Deandre Ayton is in a very peculiar situation, primarily because this is the guy that was the #1 overall pick in the 2018 NBA draft. He was drafted over the likes of Luka Doncic and Trae Young, and if the Phoenix Suns drafted either of those players, then they would be a completely different team currently. And typically, when a #1 overall pick at least plays above average during their rookie scale contract, that's enough for their team to roll the dice on them and reward them with a maximum contract extension. I mean, a great example of this is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Despite Andrew Wiggins just showing flashes of his potential during his rookie scale contract, the Timberwolves maxed him out. Now, I'm not saying that was the right decision or the wrong decision, because at the time it was very controversial, but just to give you an idea, if there's even a flash of potential, teams would be willing to extend a contract extension, especially if they happen to draft said player with the #1 overall pick. However, what separates Deandre Ayton from other previous #1 overall picks is the fact that his team is currently in contention for a championship, and their championship window closes a little bit more each and every year, primarily due to the age of Chris Paul. And as a result of that, it seems like the Phoenix Suns have been a little bit skeptical about paying Deandre Ayton a contract that any team would happily give him. Now, the current situation that the Phoenix Suns are in with Ayton is the fact that since Ayton's a restricted free agent, they have the right to match any contract offer that Deandre Ayton receives. But the thing is, if a team was to offer Deandre Ayton maximum money, chances are the Phoenix Suns wouldn't match it. So in the past, there was a rumor that the Detroit Pistons were interested in Deandre Ayton. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore, especially after acquiring Jalen Duren in the NBA draft, which, by the way, Pistons fans, I know a lot of you guys are upset at my Jeremy Grant trade analysis because, well, it seems like I was a little bit premature in analyzing that trade right before the NBA draft. I didn't really see what they were going to do in the NBA draft with the future first round pick that they were going to acquire. So obviously, I think you guys are huge winners as a result of that. I would have never seen that coming. But the latest we have on Deandre Ayton is that all signs have pointed to Detroit making a serious run at Deandre Ayton over the last few days. That appears less likely after the Pistons walked away with two of the players highest on the organization's big board. Per sources, Detroit is eager to continue to build back towards playoff contention with the aforementioned young core, and the Pistons are expected to use the majority of their remaining cap space to add multiple veteran pieces rather than just one big swing this offseason. So maybe the San Antonio Spurs enter the race and offer DeJounte Murray, as DeJounte Murray was very close to being traded. But for now, Deandre Ayton's future seems a little ambiguous. Next, we have Rudy Gobert. Despite making his third All-Star team in a row and leading the NBA in rebounds per game, Rudy Gobert is on the trade block. It's for a simple reason, however. The Utah Jazz, with their core of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, have never made it past the second round of the NBA playoffs, and they believe just running it back with their current lineup won't yield any better results, and honestly, it makes sense. So as a result, the Jazz are looking to add new pieces to help rejuvenate their team. But since the team has no draft picks going into the NBA draft, they they only can acquire new talent via trade. So their main trade piece this offseason is Rudy Gobert, a former 3-time defensive player of the year who dominates the paint defensively about as well as anybody else does. Sure, his perimeter defense isn't good, but if he's on a team with solid perimeter defenders, unlike the Utah Jazz, then it shouldn't be a problem. Rudy Gobert will be going into his age 30 season, and the Utah Jazz probably think they've already seen the prime of the block machine. So instead, they're going to try and acquire new talent to help surround Donovan Mitchell with. The two teams really making a push for Rudy Gobert currently are the Atlanta Hawks, the Chicago Bulls, and honestly, it makes perfect sense. The Hawks believe if they can get Trae Young more help defensively, and maybe if Gobert can develop his offensive game even slightly, then maybe they can get out of the first round and make a run to the conference finals like they did in 2020. But as for the Bulls, well, if they can manage to re-sign Zach LaVine, the Bulls believe they are just one good defensive anchor away from making a deep playoff run. But it's tough to say if they're right. But with the core of Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Rudy Gobert, and maybe if Patrick Williams can take a big step, then the Bulls surely can be a threat in the Eastern Conference. However, the Jazz are reportedly looking for a big haul, and seeing as the two teams most interested in Gobert see themselves as contenders, whether they're truly contenders or not is a different story, they won't be willing to part with much in order to make the trade. Unlike the next player on this list who has the chance to leave in free agency, but honestly it seems like it could go either way. After being traded to Chicago in 2017, Zach LaVine took the next step and transformed into a superstar. LaVine for the past 3 years has averaged nearly 25 points per game, on elite 3-point percentage too, going 40% from the perimeter, and is also one of the most athletic slashers in the entire league. The problem is the fact that Zach LaVine has always struggled on defense, and whichever team he does sign with will need other players on the floor to make up for the scorer's lackluster defense. However, that doesn't mean LaVine will struggle to find suitors. The teams interested in LaVine are the Lakers, Trailblazers, and the Hawks. For my Los Angeles Lakers, well, to sign LaVine, first they need to offload Russell Westbrook's contract, but if they can manage to do that, LaVine is an LA kid who grew up watching the Lake Show of the mid-2000s. He loves Kobe Bryant and would love to be the next great two guard in LA. As for the Trailblazers, well, they see LaVine as a more athletic, better offensively, worse defensively version of CJ McCollum. They want to pair Dame up with a true second superstar to see how far they can make it in the playoffs. And to be fair, there's a good shot a team with a solid bench and a starting lineup with LaVine and Lillard in it could at least be an 8th or 7th seed. As for the Atlanta Hawks, it's the same deal. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2020, and after seeing that, they believe Trae Young could be a generational player who's just one co-star away from making runs at the championship every single year. It's tough to say if the Atlanta Hawks are right, but Trae Young with a second star would be a lot of fun to watch. But to be honest, none of these destinations are that realistic for Zach LaVine. The Bulls have made it very clear that they intend on keeping LaVine by quote-unquote doing what it takes. And why would a front office go out and say something like this if they weren't confident that they'd be able to keep him on the roster? The Bulls want to keep LaVine, but also at the same time add Rudy Gobert. And if it works, the Bulls will be hailed as geniuses. And if it doesn't work, the Bulls will be laughed at for losing one of their fan base's favorite pieces. Unlike the next player on this list, Bradley Beal declined his nearly $37 million player option to enter unrestricted free agency. Or did he? Well, unlike what the reports say, Beal seemed a little confused, but still, Beal could be traded instead if he opts into his player option. Now, Beal hasn't stomped out the possibility of re-signing with the Wizards, but after allegedly possibly declining his player option to seek out other teams, it seems as if that's the direction he is headed. Bradley Beal is an elite scorer, whether that be from behind the arc or driving through bigger bodies in the paint. Beal knows how to put the ball through the net. Although Bradley Beal has stated publicly he wants to sign with the Wizards, he also said that his biggest fear is that he never gives himself a chance to win a championship throughout his career. And obviously those two statements are complete opposites of one another. There's a more recent report that suggests that Bradley Beal was affected by the fact that Jason Tatum was able to make it to an NBA Finals this early on in his career. And honestly, at this stage of his career, considering how Bradley Beal's going into his 10th season, I wouldn't blame him if he sought out greener pastures. So far, the most likely teams to acquire Bradley Beal have been the Miami Heat, Portland Trailblazers, or shockingly, even the Boston Celtics. The Heat have always been interested in Beal, whenever his name has been thrown out in trade talks or just rumors, and usually the Miami Heat aren't far behind whenever any star player is in trade rumors. They view Bradley Beal as the final piece to their championship puzzle. The Portland Trailblazers, as aforementioned, are still trying to look for a two guard to put in the backcourt with Damian Lillard, and they see Beal as the perfect partner in crime for Dame in Portland. But the Celtics? I can see a lot of people scratching their head at this one as they just made the NBA Finals. But if they want to make it over the hump, maybe getting a guy who can score on all three levels of the game could help. Maybe if the Celtics don't want to mess with their team chemistry and just see it as the beginning of a long run, the signing probably won't happen. Another dark horse team that could acquire Bradley Beal would be the Los Angeles Lakers, but of course, this situation only occurs if Beal decides to re-sign with the Wizards in order to get more money because they have his bird rights, then request a trade to the Lakers, who in this scenario would have already offloaded Russell Westbrook's contract. Bradley Beal hasn't been in the spotlight much since he's entered the league in Washington, and hopefully all NBA fans can agree that they want to see more of him on the court. Similar to the next two players on this list who are seemingly great in all aspects of the game, but need a larger market to thrive in. This one's interesting because rather than just one player, the Indiana Pacers are looking to trade either Miles Turner or Malcolm Brogdon, depending on which of the players demands a better offer. Brogdon makes sense to trade. He's going into his age 30 season, and the Pacers are going into rebuild mode, seeing as they haven't had over 40 wins since 2019, and they haven't made it past the first round since 2014. As for Miles Turner, well, he doesn't quite fit into their rebuilding window, but Turner is just 26 years old and has the potential to dominate the paint defensively late into his 30s. The Pacers are looking to trade at least one of these players, and Malcolm Brogdon was speculated to be traded during the NBA draft. But after the NBA draft came and went, Brogdon is still a Pacer. The Los Angeles Lakers offered a 2026 first round pick, Russell Westbrook, and Talon Horton-Tucker for Malcolm Brogdon previously, according to Bleacher Report. But still, the Pacers believe that they can get an even better trade package. Malcolm Brogdon and Miles Turner have both been linked to the New York Knicks and the Charlotte Hornets, and when you think about both team situations, it makes a lot of sense. However, considering the fact that the Pacers still declined the offer the Lakers gave them, it leads some to believe that whatever the Hornets or Knicks are offering simply isn't enough. It's no secret that Brogdon was nearly traded on draft day, but the secret is to whom. The Knicks made a lot of weird moves in the draft that led some to rank them as the biggest losers of the night. But maybe all those moves were to make room for either Turner or Brogdon, but for some reason, the two teams weren't able to finalize anything. This would be Turner's first time being traded and Brogdon's second. But for the next player, he's no stranger to getting traded, as this will be his fourth time. D'Angelo Russell is just 26 years old, but for some reason he's been traded 3 times already in his short NBA career. Russell finds himself in a unique situation where, despite being a great offensive-minded point guard, he's just the third option on his own team. D'Lo averaged 18 points this past season on 41% shooting from the field, and he would probably benefit from being on his own team or being a co-star to an already great player. Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns will always be the top options on the Timberwolves no matter what D'Angelo Russell does, and ever since the NBA draft, trade rumors have been flying. The two teams that make the most sense for Russell have to be the New York Knicks and the Los Angeles Clippers. For starters, the Knicks haven't had a consistent all-star caliber point guard since what feels like forever, and as for the Clippers, Russell would elevate an already great offense that is in need of consistency at the point guard position. D'Angelo Russell is still young, and unlike a lot of other players on this list, he could be on your team for years and years to come. Russell definitely has some limitations as a point guard, but that's not the reason the Wolves are trading him. If Anthony Edwards was a bust, or the team just wasn't as confident in their core of players, Russell would probably be staying. But seeing as the Timberwolves believe they already have an overflowing amount of assets, they want to flip Russell for a piece that won't just fit them better, but ideally would be much cheaper as well. Russell, as a third offensive option, is getting paid nearly $30 million a year. And although at that price you might not have a lot of buying teams, it would still make sense for the Wolves to move him and use that cap on Anthony Edwards when he needs to be extended. Similarly to the next player on this list who already seems like he has one foot out of the door. Since what feels like the trade deadline, the Atlanta Hawks have been rumored to move Jon Collins. Collins has 4 years left on his $125 million contract extension that he signed last season. And after the Hawks were not able to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals, they're now looking to move Jon Collins in order to mix up the lineup and spark something. Collins has regressed from a career-high average of 21 points and 10 rebounds in 2019 to just 16 points and 8 rebounds in a similar amount of minutes played in 2021. Collins by no means is a bad basketball player, but he's just not the big that the Atlanta Hawks thought they had back in 2019. The top two teams interested in Collins' services right now are the Trailblazers and the Sacramento Kings. But after the NBA draft came and went, with the Kings taking Keegan Murray with the 4th overall pick, the Trailblazers are probably the front runners as of right now. now. Collins is going to be just 25 years old next season, and his development might not be over just yet, but as of right now, his development timeline doesn't match up with the Hawks' perceived championship window. The Hawks, being interested in Sacramento's 4th overall selection, are probably looking for a player that could contribute right now and help them win a championship within the next few seasons. Collins will demand some pretty hefty compensation considering his past accomplishments and his young age, so don't expect a salary cap stifle team or a team with almost no assets to acquire Jon Collins. However, as time goes on, the trade package Collins will be traded for will be worth less and less, as the Atlanta Hawks are pretty set on trading Jon Collins and the whole league now knows it, so the amount of leverage they have is slim to none. Similar to this next player who's been rumored to be traded for months before draft day, the former 6th man of the year and one of the most underrated guards in the entire NBA is getting traded. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Eric Gordon is going into his age 34 season, and the Houston Rockets are rebuilding, so obviously that is the worst match imaginable. The Rockets want to get good as a team in about 3 or 4 years, while Eric Gordon will probably be out of the league by then, and getting any sort of compensation for him right now would be ideal for a team trying to build a young core around Jalen Green and Jabari Smith. While I said previously that Gordon is toward the end of his career, that doesn't mean that he's lost much of a step at all. Gordon didn't produce as much as he did in 2020 because instead of being one of the main options on offense, the Rockets, rightfully so, are giving priority to the young players who have a chance to carry the franchise for years to come. Not only is Eric Gordon still an offensive guard, but in 2021 he finished with the highest defensive rating he's ever had in his whole career. The two teams interested in Gordon right now are the Phoenix Suns, but mainly the Philadelphia 76ers. Even after acquiring De'Anthony Melton, the Sixers would love to get a solid defensive guard who can help spread the floor and create more opportunities for big man Joel Embiid. As for the Phoenix Suns, he would obviously be coming off of the bench, but still the Suns have a deep roster with a lot of star power, and depending what they do with DeAndre Ayton, they could be primed to go back to the NBA Finals just 2 years after losing to the Bucks.